If you're a small medical device company starting out with your first product, one of the biggest questions you probably have is, when do I start building a QMS and how do I do that? One of the mistakes a lot of new companies make is seeing quality management as just part of regulatory compliance. Now, that's not the true value of quality management. Quality management systems weren't invented by regulators. They were invented by industry to manage the quality of products, manage their design and production, and to ensure continual improvement. So to get the most value out of a quality management system that you're going to build, you want to be using it for those things. Now, of course, it's related to regulation because the regulators expect you to use quality management. But if you see it as just a compliance task, you're going to be expending a lot of effort and getting very little value. Also, if you do it too late, if you wait until the product is finished or nearly finished and then you start building it, you won't get much value out of it either, because you've almost done all of the work. And that means all your design, all your production, your QMS hasn't helped you manage those things, identify gaps, okay, and identify opportunities for improvement. And then when it comes to regulation, because you've built your quality management system late in the process, you won't have much documentation in it. You won't have design evidence because you didn't use it to design your product. So when the regulator shows up to audit you, they'll see that your QMS doesn't have much and will assume either you're not using it or it's not effective. So to get the most value out of your QMS, you really need to start building it early. This way it helps you with your design, helps you manage that design, manage change, and build traceability and history of that design. It also helps you manage production, manage suppliers, and make sure that the product you're selling to your customers is actually the product you've designed. And then when we come to regulation, because you're using it throughout that whole design and production process, you will generate the documentation that regulators expect to see just as part of your day-to-day business activities. Now, that said, if you're brand new to QMS, you've not done it before, some of the processes can be a burden if you apply them in the wrong place or start them too early. One example here is design control. Now, design control is intended to help you manage the development of a product, manage the changes that happen to a product, and make sure that those changes need to happen, make sure that they get validated, and make sure that they get managed appropriately. And of course that they're going to improve the product, not make it worse. However, if you're still in the really early stages of research, blue sky research, tinkering around, early proof of concept, that's the wrong time to be doing design control. Okay, it will just be a burden. So if you're new to QMS, that's not a good time to be bringing in a process like design control. That early proof of concept stage is often not a good place for people to start building their first QMS, just because there's so much going on, there's so much uncertainty, and there's so much change. However, as you get out of that proof of concept stage and you start finalizing your first prototype that you're going to go and show to customers and other stakeholders, you have a good idea of the product requirements because you've done your market analysis, you've spoken to stakeholders, you've got clinical feedback. You have a good idea of what the requirements should be, and you have a product to aim for. So that is a good time to bring in processes around design control, and if this is your first QMS, it's a good time to start building your QMS properly. So let's talk about how to build a QMS. Now, I've said before that you do that by following the international standard ISO 13485. That's because that's a highly regarded international standard. It's well recognized by all the big medical device regulators. It's also a principles-based standard, which is good for you as a manufacturer because it gives you a lot of flexibility to adapt the principles of the standard to your product and the way you run your business. However, the day-to-day activity of implementing and running a QMS system is really generating documentation. Okay, yes, you're going to design processes to manage the quality of the product and to manage design and production, but you can document those processes. And then you're going to document the evidence that those processes are being followed, document the evidence that a product has passed validation, or document the design of that product. So there's a lot of documentation being produced. So the how of building a QMS when you start out is often, where do I put all these documents and how do I structure it? Historically, this was done in paper, right? If you went into a business or a factory 20 years ago that ran a quality system, you would see, for example, the production office would have a library or a bookshelf with the quality manual and all the policies and procedures. They were managed in physical form. Everybody knew that's where you went to see the published documents. If you went next door to R&D, they would have a similar situation. Their policy and procedures for design, research and development would be in paper form. Now, we don't do that anymore, okay? Documentation is kept electronically. And this has led over time to some very good electronic, purpose-made EQMS systems. Now, some of the best and most well-known products out there are enterprise-grade systems. Okay, they're very good, but for a small business working on their first product, they're very expensive. And to be honest, you won't get the full value out of them that's intended when you're at that early stage with your first QMS. Fortunately, there are some EQMS systems now coming out that are targeted to small business and startup. There are even a couple targeted to the health industry. Now, they have a price point that's intended for small businesses and startups, okay, and they're structured in a way that facilitates those businesses using them. However, if you've only just started out, you're still in the early stages of your first product, even the prices of those systems will seem high. And you'll be thinking, yes, we can afford that, but we can also spend that money somewhere else. And at the moment, that money is better spent somewhere else. That's fine and that's understandable, okay? And to be honest, at the really early stages of product development, you won't see the value of those systems either. So what do? You need to build a QMS. You want to build a QMS so that you get all the benefits of quality management, but you don't want to spend that money. Historically, it was done on paper. Now, we can apply the same principle to electronic documents. Okay, a basic business grade filing system is sufficient to run a QMS. Now, I say business grade because there are some basic things you need in that electronic file system for it to work effectively. You need good permissions to control to make sure that, first of all, access is controlled. You don't want people editing or reading these documents when they're not supposed to. But you also don't want people editing them by accident or editing them in an uncontrolled way. Okay, one of the underlying principles of quality management is good document control. You also need good version control as part of that. You need to know which version is the current version people should be using, as opposed to draft versions or superseded versions. And you need to keep records of approval and competency. An engineering design process should be designed and approved by an engineer, not by someone without those qualifications. So you'll need to keep records of who approved that process, when they approved it, and the fact that they were competent to approve it. And you probably also want to keep track of the fact that the author of the process was competent to design the process. If you can put those things in place just in a basic filing system and have your documents in a place where you can always find them and everyone who needs them can find them, that is sufficient to get started, okay? And many quality management systems run like that indefinitely. Now, I said business grade filing systems. This is because consumer grade share drives are not the best way to do this. So I'm talking things like Google Drive and OneDrive. It is possible to use those products to do this if that's all you have, but they're not very good at permissions control and they're not very good at the way documents are shared and managed in a corporate environment. So look, you can use Google Drive if that's all you have, but really you want to be looking at a sort of business grade, commercial grade filing system like SharePoint or Confluence or something similar. Now what you will find is as your team grows, as your product develops, as your systems get more complex and you have more and more documents to manage, that basic filing system will start to seem a bit tedious and cumbersome. And this is why the dedicated eQMS systems exist. You'll get a lot of efficiencies moving into those systems once you find your basic filing system becoming tedious. Okay, and that's the point at which you want to transition to a small business eQMS, something like Qualio or similar, because at that point you will get the value for the money you're spending. You will spend the money and you won't look back because of the efficiencies you'll gain. So in summary, start your QMS early and start it simple, and then build your QMS with the business and have them grow together. Okay, that way you'll always be getting value out of the QMS that you have and it won't ever become a regulatory burden. I'm Dr. Lee Walsh from Platypus Technical. See you next time.